in the case here. People are familiar with some of the stuff I've put out here before.
It's a nice aesthetic.
A nice aesthetic, thank you. I have a sequential switch module called Tree that's been out of stock for a long time as I was redesigning it.
Sure.
And I have a prototype for the new version here. So far, everything works correctly except that the LEDs need some tweaking. I'm trying to use new, before with Tree I soldered in 8 LEDs. They're all through hole. It was not an easy way to do it. I'm trying to make everything as easy to do with the surface mount and stuff like that. But
So how do the tree and the leaves interact?
so there's a expansion cable in the back. It uses what's called the Turing machine expander protocol. So basically you can send like 8 gates from the back of Tree to leaves that'll let it share the sequence position with it, right? So Tree does the switching. When nothing's plugged in here, you get a gate out of all of these. And then leaves gives you a lane of voltage sequencing, so you can use it for notes. It also has these extra outputs that only are active during a certain portion of the travel for extra modulation. So the first output does the first 4 sliders, the second output does the middle 4 sliders, the third output does the last 4 sliders, and this output does all 8. One of the cool things about Tree is that it can do your normal clock-based sequencing. You've got your clock reset and direction input, but it also has the ability to do, if I can find some modulation, this binary addressing sequencing. So if I plug into the shift inputs, you can see the sequencer position temporarily shifts by 1, by 2, or by 4. And these all add together in such a way where I can do 1 and 2, for example, and then you get the first 4. So if I add 4, now you've got all 8, right? And the most interesting thing about this is that it actually works in conjunction with the clock input. So if I run in a clock, all of these are working together. You can see if I take some of this stuff out, we have, for example, our 8-step sequence again, but I can have it jump by 2, controlled by this LFO, right? Maybe a little slower, it's easier to see. So in this way, Tree gives you a lot of different ways to manipulate the position of the sequence in a way that we sort of try to describe as like it being like an 8-position sequencer instead of an 8-step sequencer. So by using all of these different shift inputs, you're sort of giving it all of these different pathways through the 8 positions instead of locking it strictly into just an 8-step sequence, right? And one of the nice things about the expanders is that they all daisy chain, so you can have a bunch of different leaves hooked together, but we're also releasing this new Twig expander.
Twig.
Yeah, we're calling it the canopy system. And basically what Twig does is it adds 2 more channels of sequential switching to your host module, and these also daisy chain. So you can see here we have 2 twigs and a leaves that are all controlled by the same tree, and we have essentially 5 channels of sequential switching here. So what that means in practice is that you can switch stereo signals, you can switch CV and gate together, but also there's some clever normalization that makes it so that each of the switching jacks are normalized down, and then the 2 common jacks are normalized together, and that makes it so that you can do stuff like you can have 5 inputs that are going to 7 outputs, or you can have 2 inputs where one input takes 6 steps and the other one takes 2 steps, and then that's going to 3 different outputs. There's just a lot of really kind of advanced switching stuff that you can do with this module that I am not aware of any other sequential switches that work this way, but it's going to be pretty interesting. I feel like a sequential switch is like, it's kind of nerdy, right? Like a lot of people can't really picture a reason to have it, but for me, it's nice because it sort of lets you take one modulation signal and plug it into a bunch of different places, and then you're not getting like the seasickness of modulating everything all at once, right? You have modulation that turns on and off in a really dynamic and musical way, and that way you're able to add like consistent movement and phrasing to your music, but not have it with the sort of like modular mission creep where you're like, I have an input that's not being used, I better plug modulation into it. Like for me, the sequential switching kind of gives you the like less is more way of approaching the modulator.
I can see it branching out in front of me.
Sadly, both Branch and Bark were already taken as module names, but you know, I'm gonna find as many different tree-related module names that I can.
Works out. And there's the IDUM that we were talking about earlier, and that's cool. And you know, I would say this visual arrangement does help people understand what is happening.
Yeah.
You've done well in that way, and the purple and colorful lights are a distinctive look. So good for you.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I'm always tempted. I'm just like, I'll just do black, and then nobody will bother me about it anymore. But then, whenever I think that, I'm like, no, I'm too stubborn for that.
Yeah, sure. Make it interesting.
Yeah.
Anyway, I better continue my journey.
Absolutely. I appreciate you coming to talk to us.